Hello and welcome to the Mood Processor. We take our feelings, we squish them up and we make them into shapes. Because shapes are easier to understand. Today, I'm going to talk about this collage that I made. So if you want a body double while you craft too, or just a voice in the background while you work, you're in the right place. After attending Frome Youth Pride recently, I started to think about what it was like being a young queer woman myself, going to school in the 80s and 90s and remembering Section 28. So for this collage, I'm going to write out the text of Section 28 and muse about how I felt about it. So while I was writing this out, I realized I'd never really actually read the text of it before. It was something that we were aware of at school, but we didn't really know what it meant. Section 28 were words we were aware of, certainly by secondary school, but we didn't know what it said in it. Writing this out, the word prohibition kept jumping out at me. And I just kept thinking, if you can show me anywhere in history that prohibition has ever solved a problem, I'd be really fascinated to hear about it. I'm no historian. Let me know in the comments if prohibition has ever actually solved a problem. The other thing that kept jumping out at me was the word promotion. It's like somehow being yourself was promoting something. Just living is not an ad campaign. Just being alive, being yourself. If a student said, I don't know, miss, are you going home to spend the weekend with your husband? And she said, no, my wife actually. That would not have happened. Not have happened in my days at school. And it wasn't because nobody was LGBTQIA+. It was simply something we didn't talk about. Nobody talked about those things. And if you want to say that teachers didn't talk about sexuality or their personal lives, that's simply not true either. We all knew when one teacher was getting married to another teacher. To hear these words that governed my learning as a young queer person, I found it really quite shocking. As if being yourself is like carrying a billboard. Just living your life is not a campaign. And then there's this word, acceptability. That's a word, isn't it? Acceptability. There were so many times I was writing this out, I just didn't know if I could keep going. It was really quite affronting to hear these words written out like this. That they should not promote the acceptability of homosexuality as a preferred family relationship. Oh, that's not what it says. It doesn't say preferred family relationship. It actually says pretended family relationship. I mean, wow. This was the point that I just didn't know if I could keep writing this out. That it actually says a local authority shall not intentionally promote homosexuality or publish material with the intention of promoting homosexuality. Then it says a local authority shall not promote the teaching in any maintained school of the acceptability of homosexuality as a pretended family relationship. The word is not preferred. The word is pretended. It was so baffling to me that I self-censored my own reading of the document. I'm sorry if that is equally uncomfortable to hear for you. I don't even know what to say. I thought when I was doing this that maybe I should have written all the words out first and then covered it up with all the pride stuff, but as I was working on it, I was really glad that I didn't do it that way around because I don't think I could have kept going, quite honestly, if I didn't have all of the positive messages about bisexuality already there on the page for me to work these awful words in around. I've been thinking about Section 28 a lot recently and how it affected me growing up, watching my children grow up through the UK school system. And I do keep thinking that maybe it's not that important. Not anymore. Not with all of the things that are happening, particularly to the trans community right now. Maybe a law written in 1988 isn't that important anymore. And then I read this and know that this law lasted until 2003. I was 23 by that point. I was 8 when it came in. I was 23 by the time it was taken away. And maybe, just maybe, if there was some inquiry into the impact that this law had at the time, we could use that to point to all the reasons these other ridiculous laws that are coming in right now shouldn't be happening. We could at least have some proof to say, look, you did this and this happened. Don't do it again. If we don't look at our history, we don't learn from our history. But it feels like we're not learning anything from our history. We're just looking at it and going, oh yeah, that happened. That's not enough. It's not enough to take care of the mental health of the people that went through this. It's not enough to prevent the current state of laws in this country. There's another clause in this that says, nothing in subsection 1 above shall be taken to prohibit the doing of anything for the purpose of treating or preventing the spread of disease. Which is baffling when you take into consideration that, as a result, many organisations such as LGBT student support groups closed or limited their activities or at least self-censored due to a complete lack of clarity around the word promote. I felt when I was writing this out that it was such a weird word to put there, and reading historical context around this, it wasn't just me that found this word really strange. The word promote was like it was vague enough to cast a fog of uncertainty. Nobody wants to trip over that murky line, so you choose silence. It wasn't just a law, it was this chilling hush over the entire subject. Tony Benn, during a debate in the House of Commons, stood up and said, if the sense of the word promote can be read across from describe, every murder play promotes murder. Every war play promotes war. Every drama involving the eternal triangle promotes adultery. And Mr. Richard Branson's condom campaign promotes fornication. The House had better be very careful before it gives to judges who come from a narrow section of society the power to interpret promote. And that's it, isn't it? Nobody knew what this word promote meant. Nobody knew if just admitting that you had a sexual preference yourself constituted promoting that. Nobody wanted to go up in front of judges. No school wanted to be pulled up by a local authority. If describing as promoting, the entire arts world becomes this bizarre advertising campaign for crime and chaos. Language matters. The words we use matter. They didn't choose these words because they didn't know what to say. They chose these words because they didn't want people to know where the line was. They could have drawn that line if they chose to, and they chose not to. The night before Section 28 came into law, there was a protest by lesbians who abseiled into Parliament. There was even an invasion of the 6 o'clock news on BBC One. One woman managed to chain herself to Sue Lawley's desk, and another one was sat on by newsreader Nicholas Witchell. If you don't know who Sue Lawley and Nicholas Witchell were, in my memory of childhood, they were these kind of very proper, slightly grey newsreaders. The idea of somebody having a protester chained to their desk and another newsreader sitting on a protester is utterly bizarre, but completely brilliant. All of this led to a widespread uncertainty about what the legislation permitted, including a common misconception that teachers were banned from discussing homosexuality with their students at all. The law didn't spell out a total ban, but the fear and confusion it sowed made teachers tread so lightly that many simply avoided the topic altogether. And homophobic bullying in schools largely went unrecognised. Misconception becomes its own silence, and that silence speaks volumes. And we still have this now. We have this idea that if we talk about being trans with kids, it will somehow make them want that. As if identity were a trend you could catch by hearing about it. Anyone who's actually listened to LGBTQ plus kids knows their stories, their truths are already there. It's not about pushing, it's about making space so that no one has to grow up in the same silence we're still untangling. No local authorities were ever successfully prosecuted under Section 28, but there are legal attempts to use it to stop the funding of LGBT and HIV/AIDS prevention initiatives, which directly contradicts the clause about preventing disease. So what are your thoughts? Did you grow up in schools in the 80s and 90s, even the early 2000s? What are your experiences growing up queer at this time? If you think there should be an investigation into the impact of Section 28, there's a petition linked in the description of this video. Thank you for joining me while I craft. I hope you'll come back again and see how I turn this narrative around, make it into something that I'm proud of, because we all deserve to be the owners of our own stories. Take care.